There is a food that roughly 5 million Europeans eat every single week. It shows up in supermarkets, on restaurant menus, and at family dinners. It is lean, nutrient-dense, and cheaper than beef. And if you mentioned eating it to most Americans, they would look at you like you just confessed to a crime. We are talking about horse meat. And the gap between how Europe and America feel about this one food is one of the most fascinating cultural divides on the planet. Because this is not just about taste. This is not about one culture being brave and another being squeamish. The real story goes back centuries, and it involves religion, war, economics, Hollywood, and a psychological force so powerful that it can override hunger itself. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will understand something most people never think about: why the food on your plate says far more about your history than your appetite. Let's start with the facts, because they are genuinely surprising. France, Belgium, Italy, Switzerland, and the Netherlands all have active, legal, normalized horse meat industries. In France alone, dedicated horse butcher shops called boucheries chevalines have existed for over 150 years. In Italy, horse tartare is served at nice restaurants without a second thought. In Belgium, horse steak is a supermarket staple. And across Central Asia, in countries like Kazakhstan, horse meat has been a dietary cornerstone for thousands of years. Meanwhile, the United States has never developed a domestic horse meat industry for human consumption. Slaughtering horses for food is effectively impossible to operate commercially on American soil. And most Americans would consider eating horse meat not just unusual, but genuinely wrong. So how did the same animal end up on completely opposite sides of that line? The answer starts somewhere most people would never expect: a papal decree from the year 732. Here is something that almost nobody knows. In the early medieval period, horse meat was actually eaten across many parts of Europe, including by Germanic tribes who used horses in pagan ritual feasts. When Pope Gregory III decided to spread Christianity more aggressively across Northern Europe, he issued a letter banning the consumption of horse meat. His reasoning was strategic, not dietary. Eating horse was tied to pagan ceremonies he wanted to eradicate. By banning the food, he was targeting the ritual. That ban shaped European culture for centuries, but it did not stick everywhere equally. In France and some other regions, the prohibition eventually loosened, especially under economic pressure. But the psychological imprint of that religious association never fully disappeared. And that tension between prohibition and permission planted very different seeds in different cultures. Now here is where the story takes a turn that most people completely miss. Fast forward to 19th century France. The country is dealing with food shortages, rising beef prices, and urban poverty. In 1866, the French government officially legalized the sale of horse meat for human consumption. The reasoning was purely practical. Horses were plentiful, nutritious, and affordable. Within years, those distinctive gold horsehead signs started appearing above butcher shops across Paris. Horse meat became associated with working-class resilience, with feeding your family when beef was out of reach. That association gave it dignity. It became normal. And once a food becomes normal inside a culture, it is extremely difficult to remove. But in America, something entirely different was happening at that exact same time. The 1800s were the era of westward expansion. The horse was not a food source in American culture. It was a partner. Cowboys, farmers, soldiers, and settlers all depended on horses for survival. The relationship between Americans and horses was intimate in a way that European peasant farmers simply did not share in the same cultural frame. You did not eat your partner, you named your partner. And because of that emotional bond, the idea of slaughtering a horse for meat felt like betrayal, not just of the animal, but of something deeply American. That feeling got reinforced over and over again through popular culture. Think about how many beloved horses appear in American stories, films, and legends. Black Beauty, Silver, Trigger, Secretariat. Hollywood spent decades turning the horse into a symbol of freedom, loyalty, and the American spirit. No other food animal in history has received that level of cultural storytelling. You have never seen a major motion picture about a beloved cow named after a star. And this is where food taboos around the world reveal something profound about human psychology. What we refuse to eat is almost never about the food itself. It is about identity. It is about what eating that food would say about who you are. And in America, eating horse would say something most Americans are not willing to say. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that is cultural sentiment. Surely if people were hungry enough, the taboo would break. This is crazy. It almost did. During World War II, beef shortages pushed the United States government to actually encourage Americans to try horse meat. Butcher shops in several cities began selling it. News articles ran suggesting it was nutritious and patriotic to reduce beef consumption. And for a brief moment, it worked. Some Americans tried it. Some even liked it. But the moment the war ended and beef became available again, horse meat disappeared from American plates almost overnight. The taboo had not broken. It had only been temporarily suspended by emergency conditions. The second the emergency lifted, the cultural immune system kicked back in, and horse meat was rejected completely. And because of that, the emotional architecture around horses in America grew even stronger in the post-war period, not weaker. By the time the 1970s arrived, the idea of eating horse meat was not just unusual, it was considered a moral failure. So what makes the European relationship so different, even today? Part of it is that Europe never built the same cultural mythology around horses. In agricultural societies, animals had roles. When the role ended, the animal became food. That is a pragmatic relationship, not a cold one, but a practical one. And practicality has a way of normalizing things over generations. Horse meat in France is not controversial. It is not brave. It is just food. If you are curious about how these invisible rules around food get written into entire societies, the kind of story that makes you rethink everything you think you know about eating, this is exactly the kind of rabbit hole worth going deeper on. Subscribe, because this playlist goes places most food channels never touch. But the story does not end there, because something happened in 2013 that brought this exact debate exploding into global headlines: the European Horsemeat Scandal. A routine food inspection in Ireland discovered that beef products across the UK and Europe were contaminated with horse meat. In some samples, the beef was up to 100% horse. This was not a small incident. It involved multiple countries, dozens of brands, and hundreds of millions of meals. And the reaction was extraordinary. In the UK and Ireland, countries where horse meat had never been normalized, people were genuinely horrified. The scandal triggered massive product recalls, government investigations, and a collapse of trust in the processed food industry. But here is what made it so fascinating from a cultural perspective. The contamination itself was not a health risk. The horse meat was safe to eat. The outrage was not about danger. It was about violation, about a food taboo being broken without consent. Meanwhile, in France and Belgium, where horse meat is normal, the scandal was viewed differently. The issue there was not the horse meat itself. It was the mislabeling. Same scandal, completely different emotional response, depending entirely on whether your culture had normalized the food or not. This is why food taboos around the world are one of the most revealing windows into human culture. They tell you what a society values, fears, and believes far more than any political statement ever could. And in America, the taboo around horse meat in Europe is not just surviving, it is being actively reinforced by law. Since 2007, Congress has consistently defunded the USDA inspections that would be required to legally slaughter horses for human food in the United States. Without inspection, commercial sale is impossible. The legal blockade is not an accident. It is a reflection of genuine public sentiment. Animal welfare groups, horse rescue organizations, and cultural advocates have fought hard to keep that barrier in place. And polls consistently show that the vast majority of Americans support the ban. This is not an elite opinion. It is a deep, population-wide cultural consensus. Now here is the most thought-provoking part of all of this. Neither side is objectively right. The Europeans eating horse meat are not wrong. The Americans refusing it are not wrong.
What is happening is that two societies have built completely different emotional relationships with the same animal, based on history, religion, economics, storytelling, and war. And those relationships have become so deeply embedded that they feel like morality, even when they are really just culture. That is the invisible power of food taboos. They disguise cultural programming as personal ethics. And once you see that, really see it, you start questioning every food preference you have ever had. Why do you eat what you eat? Why does one combination feel delicious and another feel disgusting, even if the nutrition is identical? The answer is almost never about the food. It is about the story your culture told you about that food before you ever tasted it. America told itself a story about horses, a story about freedom, loyalty, and the frontier. France told itself a different story, one about survival, practicality, and feeding working families. Both stories are true, both stories are powerful, and both stories shaped the plates of millions of people who never once stopped to ask why. That is the real reason America refuses a food that Europe eats without a second thought. Not because one culture is right and the other is wrong, but because the stories we inherit are more powerful than the food itself. And once you understand that, you will never look at a menu, a food market, or a dinner table the same way again. If this made you think differently about something you eat every day, there is a lot more where that came from. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because every single day, this channel uncovers one more story hiding behind the world's strangest food habits. The world eats in mysterious ways, and we explain all of them.